Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Future of Work event. I'm very happy to have you all here today. Thank you so much for joining us. I see 46 people online already, and we're only 1 minute in. That's fantastic. So this Future of Work event series is run twice this year. And a year ago, we were in London looking at this stuff in person. We ran another event in Lisbon, another in Boston, and a webinar that brought everything together. And there were some amazing insights that came through, and we captured that in a Medium article, which we shared with you all beforehand. So the key theme from that, though, was we don't know what to tell our kids. When looking at the future of work, it was hard for us out of all those discussions to work out what advice to give to our kids. And so we have a new panel here today to try and answer some of those questions and look specifically at how COVID-19 has changed the world for us. So I'll ask them all to introduce themselves, but I'm Stuart, I'm your host, and if everything goes wrong today, it's been my fault, okay? So Sophia, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, then Jill, then Biraj, and we'll start from there, okay?
All right, perfect. Okay, so good morning, everyone who joined us, and thank you for joining us. Hopefully you're having your lunch, except if you are in Boston, of course, then it's still too early. I'm Sophia, I'm head of projects and marketing at BGI. We are an innovation consulting firm, headquartered in Lisbon, but working with European Commission, and also have good ties with MIT Boston. So we pretty much do education programs. So I want to become an entrepreneur, acceleration programs, I am an entrepreneur, or innovation consulting, I'm looking for entrepreneurs. So this is pretty much what we do. And you can find all about it on bgi.pt.
Very good. Thank you, Sophia. And Jill, welcome. Tell everybody who you are.
Good morning. My name's Jill Beresford. I work out of Boston in the United States. We're being hammered by COVID-19 right now, one of the worst cities in the country. My background is basically as a bankruptcy turnaround person. I came out of marketing with Procter & Gamble, and I'm currently doing an awful lot of small business advising here in the United States, working with all the lending programs and all the changes that are being made to people's businesses and lives here.
Thank you, Jill. Great to have you here. And Biraj, who are you, my man?
Very well, thank you, Stuart. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite on the panel. So, hi guys, my name is Biraj. I'm a senior leader providing digital lottery solutions to lotteries around the world. And aside from my technology background, I'm super passionate about people, relationships, communication. And so I'm really keen to see kind of what the future of work holds with regards to that, and especially with regards to innovation and technology. Aside from that, I'm a dad of two, so my boys are 5 and 10, so I'm also really keen to understand what the future of work holds for them in the next generation as well, so keen to talk more about that.
So it brings us on to a good point. Everybody watching us today, we need you to appreciate that we are real people with real kids and real pets that may very well enter stage right or stage left at any point. Okay, so please forgive us if any of that happens. So as a kickoff then, what we've got in a situation right now, we've seen something like 3.5 million cases worldwide in COVID-19. We've seen in the UK, 44% of the adult workforce working from home over the last 3 months. We've seen some crazy changes. You know, what do you guys think that means to the future of work in terms of office space? How do you see that working for you? And Biraj, I know you've done some great blogging on this, so can we start with you on this one, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I mean, this is really knee-jerk organizations into a new way of working. And I think some organizations were well prepared because they're already maybe geographically dispersed or using certain sort of collaboration technology to be able to operate their businesses. But quite often, other organizations haven't been, and so they've had to really react to this. And from my experiences and from the conversations I've been having, people have really adapted well to this. You know, it seems to be working really well. And so for me, with regards to the office space, I really do question, what is the future of the office space? And actually, are people now really going to think hard about whether they need office space, number one, or how much office space they may need? Now, kind of completely eliminating that might be a bit of an extreme. But I think if people do still opt to have the office space, that's going to be a very different place. It's going to look and feel very different. I know in our organization, we moved into a new office quite recently, and all the discussions we were having were about a really cool, collaborative, open space, loads of sort of hot desking and loads of kind of little pods for people to have conversation, and, you know, a really cool kitchen area where we can all kind of have, you know, free breakfast and lunch and kind of, you know, just really sort of mingle. But now with the whole social distancing in place, kind of, what does that mean now, right? Is that going to be a thing of the future, or is that going to change completely? And, you know, I had this scary thought the other day about, you know, the old school sort of cubicles, and you don't see anyone and you just see these kind of walls kind of surrounding you. You know, are we heading back towards something like that? Where
perfect working environment right now, right? Perfect working environment.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, I think there's going to be a real shift in that space. The need for office, because I think everybody seems to be handling remote working really well, and productivity levels, from what I understand and from what I see, are actually no different. If anything, productivity has gone up now because people are not spending hours commuting to work, or, you know, the other distractions you have when you're in the office. People are quite focused and really getting stuff done. And if, you know, if people do opt to have an office, I just think it's going to be a really different feel, a different look, and a different size of space as well.
What do you think, Sophia? Is Biraj right?
I think, of course. I'm going to talk a little bit more into the startup world, because that's what I'm more in contact with. But actually, all the industries, like, we do work with a lot of corporate, and everyone is delaying getting back to the office. A lot of rules. Some of them, it also has to do with each government. For instance, in Portugal, you do have to do what we say mirroring teams, which is, for instance, this week, it's like the same reasoning. You never fly your entire team in the same plane, just in case, you know. So exactly, that's what they are doing in the offices. Half of the teams can return. Actually, they are doing 25%, 25%, 25%. So basically, they are rotating teams. This is what typically corporates in Portugal are doing. And so this means that I believe that until October, we won't have the reality of all in the office. At least that's, and maybe even, you know, delay until the end of the year. We don't know. In startups, in reality, there's a study in Portugal done by a famous consulting firm in Porto that said that 75% of the startups were affected negatively by the COVID. So it's and then 6% were positively affected by COVID, which typically are medtech startups or e-commerce. And so for the ones that were negatively affected, of course, they have to start reducing costs. One of the costs that you can reduce immediately, it's that. And then there's some questions. Since you are not commuting, you don't have to pay transport subsidized. So you do have, you know, some money that you can keep up until the end of the year that might make a difference. So if you look this into a very economically perspective, it might make sense. And you do understand why Twitter said, okay, we're going to have remote work forever, because you don't need people to actually be with you. Then, of course, you have the social side where, you know, you always have these breaks. It's lunchtime. For instance, at PGI, and I know that some other startups are trying to do this, joining for lunch or joining for coffee break, you know, and talking. But and maybe when we were back in work, we were, you know, just working so much that sometimes we wouldn't stop just to talk with each other, which right now we do, because it's like, yeah, we used to be friends. Let's do this, and we have some space for it. So I think but you have to put it into perspective. Once this is all over, am I going to cover all the costs? Because, you know, you might be talking about a lot of thousands of euros per month. So does it compensate to have people if the productivity doesn't go down? And, you know, if the team seems to be as motivated, maybe even more, because they have more time to spend with their family, hobbies, that you have more time, so you are also more excited. So I think that's a good some food for thought. But I think that in the startup world, it has been shown that most of them will continue to have remote work and see this as the future for the startups.
And what about you, Jill? What's yours, and what's the Boston perspective on all this?
Well, I don't know what everybody's thinking in Boston. I talked to an awful lot of commercial real estate developers, and they're convinced that everybody's going to spend more money on commercial real estate space to build social distancing. And I think they're not being very realistic, because the economics, cost structure, generally speaking, people aren't going to spend more money on rent expense when they've learned how much they can save on rent expense through this. So I'm with Barrage. I think that we're going to see commercial real estate take a huge fall. If we had looked at the world, if you'd asked us these questions on January 1st, none of us would have told you that we would have adopted technology 5 years faster.
Yeah.
It's need that made us do that. And if we look at what we've learned out of it, it's actually more efficient. It's more productive. It's definitely helped the planet. We look at air quality. So is sustainability going to be part of our future? And the answer is we sure hope so. Demographically, if you're a handicapped person, you could have lobbied for virtual work on January 1st and probably not got it. Now everybody has learned how easy it is and how much more productive it is to work on calls like this. So suddenly we've made huge demographic shifts in making the work world easier for almost everybody who participates in it, except for perhaps some of the hands-on people. And then the third thing is we've all learned about pivoting. Pivoting is the buzzword over here. I don't know if it is everywhere else in the world, but we've pivoted. And as Barrage and Sonia said, people have adjusted so quickly and so amazingly to continuing to run their businesses. And in many cases, I'm surprised at how much better some businesses are doing because of the need to pivot. And whether it's downsizing, increasing productivity, I don't think we're going to be out of this quickly and economically strong, but we've certainly learned strategically how to adjust in a crisis. And are we going to look at every day as what's the crisis of the day that we can pivot on to help our business? So that's kind of my take on it.
Jill, I think that pivoting point is really, really important. And I think what this period of lockdown has done is it's got people being more creative and more forward thinking around what they can do with their business. And I've got a friend of mine, and it is a really good example of this. He's a physiotherapist. His business is all about being in the same room with people, that tangible, helping fix their bodies. He's pivoted his business to now become an online physiotherapist, and he's now at 80% capacity because he is now treating people around the world, not just in his local town or his local area.
How does that work?
Right, how does that work, right? That's exactly what I thought. But I was speaking to him, and it was just amazing how actually the majority of what he does is through conversation and asking questions and seeing how people are moving. And they might be able to, in a short term, help manipulate or relieve pain. But a lot of the hard work is for people that then go home and follow the exercises and stuff that he asks them to do. He can do all of that through a video conference.
Right.
And so it's just amazing to see how something so traditional that you would just expect to be in an office or, in a physiotherapy room that has to be face-to-face contact. He's just pivoted that completely and he's flipped his whole business on its head, and I think we'll probably focus more on the online stuff going forward now. And I think that's relevant to so many different industries. The use of technology, the connections that the proactive connections that you make now, like Sophia, you mentioned, it's so easy just to kind of meet someone in the kitchen. Now we are more conscious of contacting people and speaking with people because we make good friendships at work, and our colleagues, sometimes some people see their colleagues more than they do their own families. And so, you miss those people ultimately. And so it's nice to be able to just reach out and, on a Slack message or something like that and say, hey, how's it going? Let's have a virtual coffee. I think I've been socially more busier during lockdown than I have because everyone wants to have a video call, or the family want to get together on a Zoom call, or we're playing these new games on the House Party app and things like that. It's been really fun to connect with people at a time that actually is really tough for a lot of people out there. So that pivoting point is amazing, I think.
I would like to add something on what Pilar said. We have one startup called Canopy, that actually, it's basically, let's imagine that you put a vest or like a body grow, but for a grown up. And while you are moving, it tells exactly the movements and the precision of your movements. And for instance, for physiotherapy, it's key. And they typically do this in, the consultation office. But right now, they are precisely working with a lot of physiotherapy so people can work this from home. But there's still one problem, which is some of these technologies are still very expensive.
Yeah.
And the fact is that the clinics have to make the decision of, are we going to continue to do everything virtually, but probably not using these kind of methodologies because they are still very expensive? And so that puts a problem, like who's going to pay for this? But then on the other side, there's a huge opportunity that you can pretty much just do everything almost from home. And this opens doors for like if you think about this medically, this can completely change the way we do things.
So we've had a couple of questions come through already. Thank you very much for everybody on that. We'll do our best to thread them through as we go, but we are limited to an hour today. But great one from Julie here at the beginning. Thank you, Julie. She says, for me, the issue is less about the risk in the office. It's fear of taking crowded transportation to get to the offices in Boston and Cambridge. Could we talk about that? How do you feel about going out into the world right now, Jill? And would you get on the T?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And in fact, I read a case study last night speaking about pivoting, where a Chinese car rental company, obviously everything shut down right during COVID-19, but the Chinese messaging was, don't take public transit, rent a car that's been nice and clean. And they got 90% of their business back. So that speaks loud and clear to the dangers of getting on public transit. It's going to be a real issue for governments that subsidize all this public transit. What is that going to look like? Because we don't really want people back in their cars, right? But I completely agree with Julie. You're either renting a bike, which is really hard to do in the winter time, or perhaps hopping in an Uber clean car, Julie, I don't know, renting a really clean zip car, I don't know, but Boston is one of the most congested cities in the world. Getting around is going to be a real challenge for anybody who relied on public transportation. That's a real challenge, and that's one of the opportunities of virtual working.
What do you think, Sophia? Are you getting on the metro?
Yeah, no. Right now, with all the advice and even from the government, and they are saying that we are going to only use 2/3 of occupation, etc. But I still don't think it's a good idea. And statistics prove that if you go to World Meter, you have some reports as well about it. But even if you, and I think that once again, I'm going to talk a little bit about innovation in this site. In Lisbon, it was a huge, and we have been talking about this before. There's a huge adherence to the car sharing, bike sharing, everything sharing. Even that, and these were sustainable solutions, right? Because at least, some of them you were sharing, you're not buying a car, you're not buying a motorbike, whatever it is. And right now, it's like, are we going back? So, and even in terms of climate change. So let's imagine that we all go to work. I'm going by my car, and I'm pretty sure that everyone who owns a car will prefer that for now, even if it's more expensive, they will do that. So will it compensate to actually have everyone in the office just for the sake of, probably it's not even going to improve your productivity. Socially, it's an important aspect, but will that be enough to justify that everyone has to go back to the office and probably have a huge climate impact while doing this? And another question that is very interesting, and Jill touched on a point that is very important, like we are supporting a lot of startups pivoting. What are these shared economy innovations are going to pivot to? That's also a question that we have to work on.
So, I'm a non-exec on a mobility company, and we have shared bikes and shared cars, and electric bikes and electric cars are zero carbon. And we shuttered everything over the break, over the lockdown, although we gave free access to key workers and to NHS workers and the police force to our e-bikes, which has been a lot of fun to see the stories coming from that. Yeah. But the demand from social distancing perspective has gone up a lot for the e-bikes, and the cars are now coming back into demand. And even me as a non-exec, one of my key questions is, how do we keep that clean? How do we keep that sanitary for people to use? And there's lots of different things. One of the biggest pieces of health guidance is open the windows before you get in the car and leave it open for a couple of minutes before you get in. It's kind of crazy, right? But that's one of the biggest pieces of health guidance, not just cleaning the surfaces like is obvious. What about you, Biraj? you normally commute on the train and then you do a bit of walking across town. How's that going to work for you going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, for me to get to the office, I would have to get on a train, and right now, clearly, I'm just not prepared to do that. I actually, even before this happened, I have to take an overground train and then an underground for a few stops. But over the last sort of year or so, I've just decided to walk. And actually, I found that just so therapeutic and just gives me that kind of headspace to do some thinking. And I just wonder how much now people are going to start to think in the same sort of ways around, if I can walk somewhere, then I will, or if I can jump on a bike, then I will, rather than taking just the easy route and jumping on a train or a tube or something. Because I think organizations will have the power to control how they operate their offices, but we don't necessarily have any influence over how the train system or the tube system is going to work. And I think, right now it's just not safe to do so. But I wonder if this is an opportunity for, countries to really change the way their infrastructure is operating. I read recently around the concept of blue zones, and a blue zone essentially is a country or an area where they have a really high life expectancy. It's the people in those areas that live the longest. And when they did the research around that, it was because they didn't have things like Amazon Prime delivery to your home, or they didn't have a mature public transport system, which meant that people were walking more, that people were exercising on a daily basis. And when you start to dig in, it's the more simplistic things in life that tends to help people live the longest, eating well and exercising more, essentially. And so I wonder if there's a way now where we can design our infrastructure and our roads and transportation systems to allow people to be more active, and where they do have to use things like trains and buses, something has to change there, right? Like, this social distancing is not, I don't think, going anywhere anytime soon. And so I'm just really intrigued to see how that's going to work. But right now, I have zero faith in jumping on a tube, or even a train. And so for me, at this stage, I just wouldn't even contemplate it, to be fair.
So I got a couple of stats last week from an interview we did with a transport policy guy in the UK, and he was fixated on the county where I am at the moment, Devon, and he said their aspiration is that over the next couple of years, 50% of travel in the city is active travel.
Yeah,
that's what they've been working with their policies for a couple of years, but now they're really doubling down on stuff. And he also said that they worked out that if professional services organizations in the city chose to have their workers continue on 2 or 3 days a week working from home, that the region would hit its carbon targets for the next 20 years.
Wow.
And I thought that was amazing, right? Just the difference. But then, as some people are putting in the chat, there are a lot of downsides to home working, right? And remote working. Have you got a key downside from your perspective, each of you?
I'll take that one on. I'm busier than I've ever been. When I do, I'm sliding in sideways all the time, from one Zoom call to the next Zoom call to the next Zoom call. You can't physically do that when you're in, at least I couldn't, in an office space. So I'm working a whole lot harder. And the downside for me is I have to learn how to adjust to that, because you can't keep 15 to 18 hour days up and working on weekends and expect to have, as Barrage says, I'm not in a blue zone if I keep that work zone, that work. But that's been the big downside for me. Although working from home, I get to work in my workout clothes, and those 2 Siberian Huskies get out for a nice long run, and I get to burn up some of my stress. But that's the really big downside, is you can actually be so much more productive that you lose out a lot on other stuff.
I think I'd just like to add, there was a study that was published, I think, around 2 weeks ago from I4CP. And they basically study in US over 500 people. They look into hours of work, and they look into activities delivered. And in 98% of the cases, it has increased over the last 3 months, which was the time during the study. So it's interesting to see that 98% is a lot. So clearly, Jill, probably people stay at home and you don't have the thing of like, let's say it's 8 p.m. Okay, it's late. I have to go home. I have to feed the kids. I have to, make dinner. I don't know, I cook dinner, whatever. So we don't have that anymore. Like we get into 8, we might eat something, we might watch TV, we might do some hobby or be with family, but you can check your email and just do this and that and that. And then eventually you're just, answering a lot of emails. And another thing that Jill said that is so true. It's like, I feel I've never had so many meetings as I do have right now. And I think it's like, and it's interesting because I saw something on Forbes that was telling about the increase, and was telling about some studies, the increase of productivity of people, but C-level people and managers, they were increasing by 35% their time on meetings, which means that 35% is significant. So you're increasing a lot the number of meetings you're having. So is this a downside? Maybe you're doing more business. Maybe you're bringing more money. I don't know, to the table. But as a downside, I think that the part that is tougher, it's two. One of them is, and BGI, we do have to close a lot of deals, not only with startups, but as well with corporates, with investors. It is different to do it online or offline. I told you already this, we take a lot of startups to Boston. We try to schedule some meetings. Typically when we go to Boston, let's imagine I want to schedule a meeting with Jill. Jill's probably going to give me 1 hour of her day. She's going to meet me at CIC and we'll stay there for an hour. Right now, Jill is going to send me her schedule for me to schedule, and I'm just going to give me like 10 to 15 minutes. It's going to be like 10 to 15 minutes, that's it. So for a startup to pitch, to try to pitch for investment, to ask questions, blah, blah, blah. And typically when we are in Boston, people are very well connected. So they just pick up on the phone, I'm going to also call this guy and he's also going to meet with you tomorrow, or we can arrange and have lunch today. All of this is lost on the process because now Jill just give me 10 minutes. She's probably not going to do the connections of who she can, connect me with because she has other things to do. Because people are so more time concerned, that's, it's difficult to make business. It's more difficult to get people's real attention because, for instance, we have a lot of webinars and I'm pretty sure, I don't know how many people are here, but they're probably, reading some emails. They are probably doing like, if we were all together at Canopy talking, everyone that's there is there. Potentially some will text or something, but they are there. In here, most of them are probably, doing something else at the same time. So you do lose a lot of potential. You have to be the purple cow to, the entire time be like, just listen to me. This is important. So this is a downside. And then, of course, you have the social part. And I've seen here some people saying some stuff that I completely agree. In Portugal, we also had this very negative vision of working from home. Oh, if you're working from home, you're really not working. But yeah, and so that's one of the reasons why most CEOs want people back in the office. It's really to kind of, see people working. And so I understand that's a negative side of it. And then, of course, I mean, if you don't have a family, if you go home, you're alone, it can be very depressing. And in Portugal, on the news already talk about the increase of depression in people. So that's a downside for sure.
And Biraj, what's your one key bad side to this remote working and the working from stuff? Because they're obviously slightly different topics.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the key thing, and me, Stuart, I'm a people person, right? I love that interaction with people, and that's both in the office, but also just kind of general banter in the local coffee shop with the barista, and those types of things. That's the thing I miss the most, really. And so I've seen a couple of people mention also is kind of you can't beat that kind of face-to-face when it comes to business development or when it comes to just general socializing. I completely get that, and there are definitely ways to overcome that through technology, which is also another downside for me. Actually, is the amount of screen time, and kind of I mentioned my 2 young boys earlier on, but this COVID period has completely contradicted our beliefs around screen time. Like,
that was the new norm, right?
Like, because they're both working, homeschooling, they're both online lessons, and literally my eldest is 10 years old. He starts his lessons at 8 o'clock in the morning. He finishes at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he has his breaks in between, but otherwise he's on a laptop for that whole period. And then he might watch a little bit of TV in the evening or whatever it may be, and it just goes completely against our beliefs of screen time. And that's no different for us. So I think one of the downsides is, as much as a lot of people have adapted to working from home, what I would like to have seen more is people adapting their ways of working. And what I mean by that is we still see a lot of people that have bad meeting etiquette. Will still hold a 1 hour meeting for something that is not a 1 hour meeting, right? And what it does is it forces you to be on that screen for an hour when you don't need to be on the screen for an hour. So I think, it's not really a downside, but it's almost kind of like an area of improvement, I think, which is, if this is going to continue for a little bit longer, not only do we have to adapt to work from home, we must adapt the way that we work. We must be cognizant of people's home situations. They may have children, but they're also homeschooling at the moment. They may be back to back in meetings, and so we should think about, do you really need an hour meeting if it's only a half an hour discussion? Do you even need to have a video call, or can you just pick up the phone and just speak to someone? These types of things, which I think is probably having a negative impact on people because of the focus sitting in front of a laptop, and that then starts to have impact on your posture and things like that as well. So yeah, they're the sort of areas that are kind of coming to mind for me.
I think it sort of speaks a lot to the point that Annie was making in the chat, that remote working and working from home are different things, right? That there are different practices to remote work successfully. And this whole asynchronous organization and the way you get about that, I think is very interesting to look at. But Kevin's asked us all, put a little challenge to us in the chat here. What new positive practices have we each adopted during this time? And while you guys think about that, I'll take it first because I read it earlier. So for me, two things really. One is I learned through the different things we've done with Annie and with Tiana and stuff about how remote workers work successfully. And one of the things that kept coming up was the use of a schedule in the day. And I'm pretty well driven and time balanced and everything normally, but I adopted a very different schedule where my morning I do in several sprints, and I do my most productive work in the morning, and I do my most creative stuff in the afternoon, and I have breaks that are separated basically by family meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner and little break times. And so we get lots of time together, and I stagger myself so that my most creative stuff is always in the afternoon when I am more creative. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say that sort of a positive practice, if you like, is that I get up and I do things earlier, do stuff that I work on myself. I do them a lot earlier. I get up at 5:30 and work then. And I find that gives me a much more interesting day and I do my most dedicated kind of piece that sort of early with no interruptions and no extra calls from other time zones and all the other stuff. What about you, Sophia? Any sort of key practice you've adopted?
Yeah, I have to say I have one this is very personal, but because everything is right now, I just feel like everything online, like just exploded. Like I receive more emails per day, and when I say more emails per day, I'm like talking about over 250 emails per day, which is just, do you really need to send me an email? Do you really need to send me an email? So, and this goes to the Ash point. Do we really need to have 1 hour call? Can we solve on a 3-minute phone call? Yeah. So and so I start waking up. I'm not doing it every day, but for instance, the last 2 weeks I've done it all days. Today I haven't, which was waking up at 5 a.m. And there's like this period of almost 4 hours where everything is so quiet. It's amazing. And
but if we all get up at 5 a.m., it's not going to work, right?
Yeah, but then what is bad about this is that it's 6 p.m. and all my other colleagues are, full speed. It's like, Sophia. And so I'm like, I'm so tired of my day. It's so been many hours, but, you're one phone call away, or you're just, one email away. So people will talk to you. So one of the things that right now, and now this was very personal, but in terms of a company, one of the things that we put in place to actually manage, what everyone is doing, so we don't repeat tasks because we don't communicate. And so every day we have a 30 to 1 hour, and this might look a lot, but it helps us a lot. Every day at 10 a.m. BGI meets for a team meeting where everyone very briefly says, my yesterday and my today, what do I need your help for, or don't I need your help for anything? And so we go through this. This is something that we don't have. And I'm pretty sure even if in 1 year we all go back to work, I'm still going to keep this because It's so good. And then all of those platforms, Monday.com or organizing Vaza and all of these things, it's a boom for them, like to organize Slacks, etc. I think that's right now everyone is using something to very quickly understand who did this. Is this to do being done by someone or not? Do I have to follow up with this client? And so I think that we are digitalizing everything that typically would be social. Look, have you done this? Look, right now everything is in a computer, which is pretty good for administration because then they can really understand, like, how is the situation? Is this a chaos or not? So, yeah.
Interesting. What about you, Biraj?
I think for me, one thing I've tried to do is stick to my timing. So similar to yourself, Stuart, kind of just because I don't have a commute in the morning anymore doesn't mean that I spend an extra hour in bed. I still wake up at the same time. I'm an early riser just like you. I'm normally up by sort of 5:30, get my workout done at home. And also what this period has allowed me to do actually is focus more on self-development. And so, my day still starts at 9 o'clock. It's so easy and so tempting because you're at home to work earlier in the morning and work later into the evenings. I still try and keep as much of a structure to my day as I did when I was in the office, but use the extra time on either side now for self-development. So, I'm using that time at the moment personally to listen to more podcasts and read books, which is something that I never really had the chance to do. I'm also just doing more with the kids as well, and kind of we've started to do some little projects at home. So my son started doing a photography course. So basically, we've started doing photography together. And then from a personal perspective, there's a few things that I'm really passionate about, and so I've just recently started a new Facebook group which is focused around for men only, allowing them to open up and talk more about topics that men don't feel comfortable to talk about. And this weekend, I committed to now converting that into a podcast series as well. And so I never would have had the time and the headspace to think about that kind of stuff. When you're commuting back and forth, you don't get home until 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. Then it's all about getting the kids to bed and all that kind of stuff. It just wouldn't have the headspace for it. And so I've just used that time more creatively, I guess, to be able to do some of the things that maybe I've always wanted to do but never had the chance to do so. And I've done that by keeping my structure pretty much the same and using the advantage of having that time in the morning and having that time later on in the evening to do different things.
Okay. And Jill, what about you? How are you? What's the most positive practice you've adopted?
Well, definitely working much more efficiently. I found that I could be, when I was doing the commute, coming in and out of Boston can be a 4-hour event. That's just really, and that got me stressed. So when I got home, I would arrive home stressed and trying to figure out what to do to be more or pick up on productivity. And what was stressing me out was all the stuff I wasn't getting done. So I think what the virtual work allows me to do is to work much more productively, much more efficiently. I still have a tremendous amount of stress as I read the stream down the side. Everybody's talking about how their email traffic, Sophia talked about it, is way up. So I've learned to be more productive, more efficient, and the self-care time to use it more creatively. So one of the things, I've lived in my new house for 5 years. I never used the fireplace because it was too much work to go out to the wood pile. Now that's an exercise routine, right? Go out to the wood pile, bring in 8 loads of wood, deal with all the screechy things that are going on in there. I'm not sure what's been living in there in the 5 years I haven't used it, but and that's an exercise routine for me, taking a break away from my computer and forcing myself to go out in the rain or a cold, nasty day and take the dogs for a walk. And I've been more vigilant about that than I've ever been in my life. So I've kind of done this rebalancing, and it's a rebalancing that is so much healthier for me from a business productivity point of view and from a personal point of view.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make us all feel stupid for how we used to act before, right?
It kind of does, doesn't
it? Take to kick our asses, right?
Yeah. And for those people who are saying, well, I just want to go back to the way it was, I'm like, I don't think I do.
Yeah.
I don't think I do.
Yeah.
And I think, we're talking about the future of work, but this transition period with COVID-19 and not really understanding when normal if at all, will ever be possible. There are no vaccines, there are no serious treatment protocols right now. There's a decent amount of testing in most countries, but not all countries, and there's a lot of this left to go. So, what is it going to look like in 2 years' time? We may not have choices inside that 2-year barrier, that 2-year timeline, right?
Yeah.
One of the questions Prabha put on here was, and thank you, Prabha, shout out to Avero, bringing some different districts from Portugal. She mentioned, if we get through this, when we get through this, and we're now back to in-person meetings, as some people in Portugal already are, will we have the license to continue doing anything remote? It's kind of the opposite view. Right now, everybody works remotely because we have to, and we're working from home and we're doing meetings like this. But when you have the choice, will the business culture be, I don't want to do that virtual stuff, it's supposed to be face to face, and we have a choice, so we're going to do it? Or will we be able to live with a hybrid world? What do you think? Is it going to go back to old school? Is it just going to flick a switch back and straight in person?
I read a great article the other day, and it talked about how in 8 weeks, and I think it was actually less if you really think about it, how we advanced the use of technology by 5 years. So this, what COVID-19 has done is taken us to 5 years into the future in 8 very short weeks. So how we use the technology now that we all have it at our fingertips is going to be up to a culture that we work in, the bosses that we have to work for, the flexibility. It's going to be changing old patterns of behavior, but the technology is here to stay, and how we use it personally, how we use it in businesses, and how businesses are going to use it to capitalize on the key important point here is how consumers are going to change their behavior. How are our customers going to change the behavior, and how are we going to use this technology to sell them and be at the top of the team as it relates to beating the competition and increasing our bottom line?
So we're about to open up a really interesting topic here, and I think there's an interesting slant to look at, which is, if you look at the UK, you look at Portugal, you look at the US right now, and I can't really speak to India in the same way, and thank you to everybody from India who's on the call today, but we're probably more reliant on state aid for the businesses and our personal income streams than ever before. The amount of loans that have gone through, the amount of universal credit in the UK, the amount of unemployment benefits. Are we kidding ourselves when we say we're actually like doing capitalism and selling to people and doing stuff? Are we really coming quite close to that point of inversion where really it's state owned? If you look at Jaguar looking for £1 billion payout, you look at the transport networks, you look at how many small businesses are propped up right now by loans and things from the government.
Right.
Is it just a state society? It's complete opposite of what we said a year ago, which was we could almost see the reduction of the state to a minimalist component if needed at all, because currencies were independent, cryptocurrencies moving outside of the normal realms, people being able to pay their tax wherever they wanted through the remote working approach and making their businesses in Estonia. But right now, are we just kidding ourselves? Do we all just work for the state?
Well, it's a great question. It's a great question. How much have we burdened the future generations too, right? And Social Security. It's a great question.
I have to say that, for instance, in Portugal, since I was born, there was no year that we got avid, which means surplus in the end of the year. This was it, and then COVID strikes. So, and now we are going back in debt. I mean, people from UK probably have already seen. We are going to ask for a bailout from European Commission, actually from Eurogroup, which, by the way, the president is the Minister of Finance in Portugal. So it makes sense that we got money from there. And that question is very pertinent, because most of the startups, I was telling you about 75% of the startups interviewed here in Portugal are suffering with COVID. My work right now, pretty much 20% of my time is finding sources of funding, which is typically public funding because it's grants, to support them during this period. I'm not just talking about layoff. I'm talking a little bit more than that. Like, how can I support the startup until the end of the year? We're talking about grants of up to $500,000 per startup, which is quite a lot of money. And there's a lot of sources. EIT just launched a lot of calls in EIT food, EIT climate, EIT digital. And we are writing actively these applications with the startups that we see fit. So all in all, they don't owe anything. There's no equity. They are giving grants away, but in the end of the day, the government doesn't own anything, right? So, and I believe that if once everything will go back to normal, eventually, not completely normal. And I think that one of the things like working from home or remote work will be a possibility for many, but you will have to have people that start producing, going from farmers to factories, everything else would probably have to go back, because otherwise, all countries will collapse, right? So we need to continue production. Another thing that it's interesting is consumer behavior, because consumers have now started to buy a lot offline. We were doing a study for one of our clients where there was a huge increase of 145 on e-commerce, which is normal. But when I say e-commerce, I'm not just talking about grocery. I'm talking about furniture. I'm talking about clothes. I'm talking about e-commerce as a whole. Of course, grocery shops increased more, but everything else has also increased. And so it's interesting, once I start buying from there and I have a good experience, probably I'm going to do it again, right? For instance, I have done some online shopping, but right now I do much more, right? Because, I just don't want to leave home, or, when I see a lot of cases appearing here in Lisbon, maybe I want to stay at home a little bit more. And I have good experiences. So even right now, once everything goes back to normal, probably I'm not going to the store. It's so much more convenient. And then if something goes wrong, I just send it back and then they'll send me something right. So, it's more convenient. So my question even goes a little bit further, which is, how is this impacting life of retailers? Or how is this impacting even marketing? Just, have you seen, this is absolutely amazing, the money that has been reallocated to digital influencers, YouTubers, bloggers. Is this the creation of a new generation of, professional influencers? Because, they're being well paid. And in Portugal so far, this was like really bad. You would get like a bag of gifts at home and that's it. But right now, and I used to work a lot with influencers at L'Oreal. So it's completely shifting. So even new jobs might be arising as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're all creatures of habit as well. I think is it 21 days to form a new habit?
Yeah.
And we've all formed new habits over the last 21 days.
Unless it's learning French, in which case it's about 45 years.
Count homage.
But I think we were all creatures of habit in the way that we used to live, and the way that we used to work, and the way that we used to commute, and all of that's changed now. And I think people are getting used to that, and I think it's going to be hard to go back to the way things were. And so going back to the original question around, will we go back to the way things were before? I just can't see it happening. I really can't. And there might be elements of it, yes, but fundamentally, I think things are going to change. The digital space is going to boom even further. It was already booming, but I think it's going to boom even further. I think people's technology skills and appreciation of technology is going to go up. Those people that maybe were not as au fait or had a phobia towards technology are now doing Facebook Lives and doing FaceTime calls and all that kind of stuff. I have uncles and aunts that didn't have a clue about how to do that and are now FaceTiming me, and it's like, wow, never thought I'd see them using that. And so that's just a simplistic example, but I think people have just embraced it because they've had to. And I think that fear factor has now been eliminated, and that hopefully will kickstart the confidence to then go and do the next thing and learn the next technology and things like that. So I think, whether that's in retail, whether that's in something else, digital is going to just be the new norm, right? And
I have to tackle here in one point that you have mentioned so many times, and I think it's very interesting. I don't have kids, but I know that all of you have, so you probably have a different perspective on this, but it's the fact that the part of social interaction, like the experience of going to a store and actually, a retail, waitress be there and ask you, do you want this? Or maybe this would go better with this than that. They even give you advices. Or the fact that we are going for a do we give a handshake in the end of the meeting or not? Or the fact that kids, and you were telling the story of your kid, like, I'm just going to, be next to people, and like a rebel situation, like I'm touching someone, and it's funny to see that that's what, like, I remember when I was a kid, my parents also like, go play, just talk with them, and that would be something good. And for instance, my sister lives in an area where you have like a square inside of the condo, and like kids want to talk with each other, and like parents are like, no, come here, just stay here, and this is our place, that place is from the other family. And it's interesting to see how probably when we talk about future of work and let's say like 20 years from now, maybe people want to business like we do. Maybe it's no longer important I go to Boston to actually have those introductions. Maybe it's no longer important that we have a meeting face-to-face or online. Maybe, everything, like right now, the fact that I like to touch clothes before I buy them, maybe that won't be a thing for girls anymore, or men, I don't know. So there's a lot of things that, or even sports, like think about sports. Like Portugal is crazy about football, and I think that many other places are too. When I say football, soccer, but are people just going to be very used to doing everything from home? And do we need stadiums as big as they are right now?
Well, I mean, I think one of our challenges today, as we all admitted before we started, is trying to keep ourselves to 60 minutes. And I'm a little unsure about offering this topic as we're getting close to the end. But what we're touching on here is a very interesting concept, and we're very empowered individuals with lots of kit. I have 4 laptops for the kids, 2 of them broke, we've still got 2 left, that kind of thing. But when we think about inclusion and we think about a world that's moving more digital, as a trustee of a school, I know that some of the kids in our schools don't have access to broadband, don't have access to kit, don't have families who can support them with that kit, even if they had the access, have trouble with food, have trouble with free school meals, have to be supplemented in a lot of ways. So if we're moving into this more digitally enabled world, how do we take everybody with us? Can I throw that one to you in the last sort of 7 or 8 minutes of our hour together?
Well, I think that's the way it's going, and therefore, the cost of laptops and the cost of broadband and things like that. I think this is where the government maybe can come and step in as well, to be able to reduce that, to make it more accessible and make it normal for people to have access to broadband and to have access to a laptop. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but I think that's where we need the support of those that have the power to be able to do some of that stuff, because it is the way forward. And you're right, schools are having to support those that don't have that, and in some instances where kids don't have those opportunities, they're having to learn in different ways, and to some extent are maybe falling a little bit behind. But
I mean, there are 1.5 billion kids not in school right now, in disrupted schooling, and some of those kids are just going backwards compared to the others. But the gap is getting huge.
Exactly. So it is tough, and we're going through a dilemma right now about do we send our kids back to school? My youngest is in year 1, and therefore due to go back after this half term, and we are really considering whether we want to do that or not. Now, there's the whole social interaction piece that we would absolutely love for him to go back and experience. And then there's the whole, he's not getting maybe what he needs at home because we're also working, and it's hard to juggle homeschooling with getting our own stuff done. It's a really tough one. And I think this is where we do need to look at, support of wider communities and the state, as you say, to really sort of help in that instance.
So one of the things I see is this notion of being, we've always used the words being customer centric, but I think more than ever, the consumers are going to tell us. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is going to be, it worked in COVID-19, why can't you continue it?
Yeah.
So when we talk about inclusion for kids who, we spend a lot of money in education working with special needs kids who may benefit more from this kind of face-to-face interaction versus the drama of getting them into a van, driving them somewhere, getting them into a school system, dealing with the bullying, that kind of thing. What I do think is going to come out of this is definitely improved economics for the businesses that survive. And that this is where we always run into the issue of what do corporations do with their improved economics to help those that have not. That's a really big issue. So when we started the conversation, we talked about commercial real estate space. Yeah. So if you're not using commercial real estate space as much, you can drop another 30 or 40% to the bottom line, which is going to happen with corporations. You've pivoted to get your customers away from the competition. And so now your revenue streams are stronger or back, or ideally, in some cases, we're seeing 30, 40, 50% increases in revenues. What are these corporations going to do with the money that they didn't do before to help those that don't have broadband, that don't have food, and didn't have access to work the way they now have access to work? That's a rhetorical question. I don't know the answer. I know in America, we respond to the shareholders. So the stock market will zoom for those companies that are doing a great job, and they're less likely, maybe, to spend it where there is need. But that's my 2 cents worth from the American side.
And so, Sophia, from a Portuguese side, how do we take everybody with us in this much more digital journey? Or are some people just going to get left behind?
For instance, we were, let's say, forbidden. Now, I think that we are still forbidden to go to nursing homes. And so, because in the north, there was a huge spread because people were visiting their parents. And so this was a huge problem, because once a nursing home got infected, very easily everyone dies because they're all over 75 years old. And so this is the process of seeing people who don't know what Facebook is. They can't even spell Instagram or anything else. And now they are receiving tablets and they are learning how to use it. And this is different. Like I haven't been able to visit my grandmother. She's in a place where there are no cases, so we don't want to go there. Actually, I think they close borders. Some municipalities close borders so they don't get infected with someone else. But they are going to, allow people to go in, and I'm going to teach her out because I phone call her, but so she can see us, because it's kind of hard. And so you are looking into a digitalized era where even the elderly that were okay not to use technology is no longer okay not to use technology. Yeah. So we have to learn. We have to make it easy. We have to, we do a paper with steps, but they will have to connect with you over a chat on WhatsApp or whatever it is, to do a video call. I think that's one of the topics. And the second topic, I think it's very important, is going to hugely influence us. Even the contact we have with professors. Like, I remember some of my professors be telling me, like, Sophia, you should apply for it, because after the end of the class, they would go to talk to you or with the students, or even stay with you on the break. Like, you should apply for these poetry contests, or you should apply for these. You can get a scholarship if you do this. Right now, you'll have probably one professor to everyone else. Even the public university, even the public and the private. Do I still have to pay as much if I'm not using infrastructure? And if I'm paying for a professor that is for 1,000 students online and used to be for like 50, because you are reducing your resources. So that even on that point, it's interesting to see how everything's going to change. And then I saw something here in the chat that I found very interesting. Free Wi-Fi in exchange for you to get to give information about you and allow everyone to track your data. And we have a lot of startups working on data. Data regulation is super hard. We are putting lawyers and mentors just in this area. It's a super difficult market. But this is such a huge opportunity to sell data to corporations, for them to, once again, Jill, go for their customers, see what the customers want. Where are they looking for information? And so I believe that we are just in the ticking point where they can track information from my grandmother, who they have never had the possibility to do this. From your kids as well, like they're probably already tracking, but now it's, this could be such a ticking point, or just changing everything, the way things are done, and reaching everyone. That's scary.
So here we are at an hour. So I'm going to leave you with one question to answer, okay? Which is I'll let you think about it while I talk, okay? I have an 8-year-old daughter. Her name is Sophia. It's a great name.
Yeah.
I have to work out what to tell her, what to learn, what job to go for, what, to encourage her in her goals. What should I be saying to her with what we know today? Okay. While you think about it, I'll give you 2 seconds to think about it. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for being here today. We've had representatives from India, from America, from the UK, from Portugal, from France, from Germany, and from a lot of other countries in between. It's been great to have you here. I'm sorry we only have an hour to try this topic out today. There's another edition in November, and I hope you'll join it. And for those of you that signed up through Crowdcast, you should be getting a survey to let us know what you thought about today and how we can iterate and improve for next time. Okay. So let's go with Sophia for Sophia, followed by Jill and Biraj to close.
I was not sure if we were going to ask this or not, but I think it's such a great question. One of the first books my father gave me to read was, I didn't even like it at the time, but it was all about scientific fiction. Yes. And so there was it was Isaac Asimov, The Metal Laugh. I don't know if any of you have read the book, but it's about the future. And it's how all the jobs we place when machines take over. Look, they don't take over. We humans maybe take over. Like, they do all the production. They do all, like, people don't even know how to read because, the machine will talk to you, tell you the news, tell you everything. And so people will all stay at home, receive an allowance. There's only 2 kind of people that can go out to work. Like, everyone can go out, but everyone is at home. So it's very similar. Like, I invite everyone to read that book because it's very interesting. And Isaac Asimov wrote this, many years ago, so it's interesting to read it now. And there's only 2 jobs that you need. One, there is basically people from maintenance and design of robots, so pretty much engineers. And the other is artists, because one of the things that the robots could do some statistics and potential suggestions on how to do art and what consumers like, but inventing new things they are not able to do it. So it's interesting to see that creativity at all could be an interesting thing. I think there's other stuff that is interesting, like football players or rugby players. All of these guys, they entertain us, and I think there's always going to be a job for them. But maybe she should be an artist or an engineer.
Yeah. And Jill, what advice do you want to give Sophia today?
Well, I think given that we all understand that technology is the way of the future, I think we need to encourage our children to do what they love, but they're going to have to learn how to do it with the technology. So if your kid's great at math, then an analytical brain like that is an engineering brain, an IT brain, a technology brain. That's fantastic. But if your daughter likes to paint and do nails and wants to be an artist, she could be the best Banksy around when he's not around anymore by adapting the technology. So whatever we tell our kids, as much as we don't want them to have a lot of technology right now, using it responsibly, respecting it, and being creative with it is definitely the way of our future. So I don't tell them to be a fireman, because fires might be fought differently, but you have to understand the technology on how to fight the fires differently.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Biraj, close the show. What have you got on this one?
So I would say follow your passion, follow the path less trodden. And what I mean by that is, don't just go with what you think you should be doing or what society thinks you should be doing. Don't be afraid to try new things or to experiment, so to speak. And also just don't be complacent in thinking, because the world changes, life changes, and therefore we have to learn to be adaptive and we have to learn to change as well. So as an 8-year-old going forward and thinking about whatever it is you want to do, always think about the next step as well on your journey, because we're always going to be moving forward. And therefore, as a young 8-year-old, there's no better way to learn new skills that are transferable as well. Because as things change, we have to pivot, we have to adapt as well, and therefore learn skills that you can transfer from industry to industry, or from job to job, or from country to country.
Adaptability, right? Adaptability all the way. So I want to salute all of you and give you a round of applause. Thank you so much for a great conversation today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else has got something from it as well. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Great to see you. Thank you for a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you too.